Mike Karopian. There's been some questions about building armatures. A lot of people kind of don't use them. They're afraid to use them, or they just never learned how to make one. And there are many cases where you're going to want to use an armature, depending on what kind of sculpture you're doing. Most of the time, you know, many of my students will use water-based clay and then fire it, and they don't need an armature in it. They just hollow it out and it bakes. You can't bake something with aluminum armature in it. It just would tend to crack the sculptures. In this case, there are times where you need an armature, and when I was at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts many years ago, we built a basic armature. It was to hold water clay or plastiline, whatever you wanted. It was a very simple armature, kind of a skeleton of the figure, and it's really simple to make. And you might find you can make it for figures or animals. And in this case, I have a project that I'm working on, a commission for my hometown of Manchester, Connecticut, and they needed to we need to figure out what pose that we want this runner to be in. His name was Joe McCluskey. And so we're using archival footage and photographs to determine, you know, what pose would be best. And eventually this will be over life-size figure running along the greenway. So in this case, I decided, since we need to come up with some kind of pose, I want to give them a couple ideas. And in most cases, if I had an armature, we would have a pipe that would come out at 90 degrees and be bolted down into this wood base here. In this case, I found that if I used a small threaded rod and tied the armature to that it would work really well. It's bolted on the top with a washer, and it is also bolted on the bottom with a washer. And you just cinch those up, and you have a pretty sturdy armature. And then I just tie the armature on with some wire. But in order to make the armature, a lot of times I'll use aluminum gauge wire, depending on the size of the figure. If you want to do a 12-inch figure like this, I used 1/8-inch wire. You can buy this aluminum wire at most stores, art stores, supplies. If not, you find a wholesaler that will sell you a whole spool of it. But again, if I'm doing maybe an 18-inch figure, I would use a 1/4-inch or anything larger, 1/4-inch to 3/8. After that, you almost get in a situation where you want to do some welding to create the armature so it's strong. Depending on how much mass and clay you're using. Again, some of these areas I'm using metal, but I don't have a lot of clay that's going on there. If I'm using a lot more clay, I could fill it with foam or some other things. So the first thing I do is determine the size of the figure I want to make, and so in this case it was 12 inches. This one's approximately the same size, and the first piece I want, there's 2 pieces of wire you need. You need to cut one that is the length of one leg up the head, down the hips, and then down the leg. So that's that, right? And then you need a second wire that's about the same, a little shorter, but what this does is it works to the midsection, up to the shoulders, and then down to the arms. And then I tie these with some tie wire, likely 1/16 of an inch or something, and I can tie that on really tight. It's important to adjust it so that once you have this section, you have this long wire that's just basically bent like this, you want to determine where the halfway point is. And usually the great trochanter and the pubic bone is approximately, on most models, about halfway. You can adjust your armature to your model. If you have a specific model that has very long legs and a shorter torso, you just adjust it before you go into tying the tie wire on. So in this case, if this is a 12-inch figure, this measurement here with a little extra on top of the head, about 1/4 of an inch, because I'm going to add clay there. Again, I don't want the armature to show through this. In this case, you don't see the armature. That's kind of a rule of sculptors that built armatures, that you don't show the armature out. That's the key. So we try to do that, and it's not really a skeleton. What it is just a support for the clay. So we want that wire along the whole thing to run in the center of the body. center of the arms, center of the head, center of the midsection. And this is just one section of that, okay? So here I've added the hips, okay? And now the other part, this is the arms. And what I did was I found my midsection here, I brought it up to here, and I figured, well, a little bit, 1/4 inch for the head, and I've got my shoulders. And these can be adjusted. And then I take my tie wire and tie it on. So this is pretty much the only difference I did with these armatures was I went over to the vise, and you take 2 pieces of wire. You take 2 pieces of wire, and you put one end in the vise, you put the other end in the drill, and you slowly drill, and these will twist, and you get this nice twisty sort of effect. It's kind of a cool trick. It's fun to do even if you're not building armatures. That's about it. As far as putting the clay on, like I said, I try to cover the whole armature in clay once I have the pose. I took the armature, I wired it, as I said, wired it onto a threaded rod with 2 nuts and washers, which cinched it to the board, and it doesn't move. You know, it's pretty good. It shakes a little bit, but it's good. And this, if you want to move it, you know, you have to move the arm, you have to adjust things. You can do it pretty well, and it's fun, you know. And it also gives the committee or some group that you're working with a chance to see, oh, okay, well, you know, if the arm was down a little bit further, how could we do? How's that look? And you can adjust these things to some degree. And it's a lot of fun. You can use animals too, and what you do is you just add an extra section for a tail. It's really easy, and make sure the wire is tight when you wrap the tie wire on. That's about it really on armatures. There's probably there's a lot of sculptors I've come across through the years that don't believe in armatures, and it's like, well, how can you not believe in armatures? You know, it's just part of it. It's a tool. And, you know, well, you know, I can't, well, you have to learn to use them. And at first you're going to find, you want to make sure you know where it gives you a good balance of proportions. You can adjust the proportions depending on what model you're going from by just bending the knee in a certain place and adjusting the shoulders. You can make a woman out of the same armature you can a man. But if you have something to go on ahead of time and you know who the pose is, or it was a woman or a man or an animal, you know, you can adjust the armature to that. You could even use a photograph and just place this onto the photograph of the same size and cut it out. It's pretty simple stuff. So I hope that's somewhat clear, and if you have questions, feel free to contact me at my website. Again, it's quite easy to do. And you'll be happy because your clay won't be falling down. And I had one student who didn't use an armature for about 200 pounds of clay, and she came in the following week. So guess what happened? I said, what? And she said, it fell down. I said, did it kill anybody? Because that 200 pounds of clay on a modeling stand, like this, a rinky-dink thing. Anyway, we don't want to go there. We want to be safe, sculpt, and have fun. Talk to you soon. Bye.